Hey guys, hope y'all are having a good day today. I have been reading so many things about, what Canon is going to do with their mirrorless system, what Nikon is going to do with their mirrorless system, and I think that everybody's a little bit off the mark, but in this video we're going to be talking about Nikon's mirrorless system that they're going to be coming out with. I think it's reasonable to say before Canon does theirs. So Nikon has got some unique things going for it already. They've already pushed past that 30 plus megapixel barrier. They're in the 40 plus megapixel area. I think they gotta put one of those sensors in. Obviously they'll need a mid to lower range one, so fewer megapixels, like 24 or so. That makes sense, right? We've heard 9 FPS, we've heard 4K, we've heard totally new lens mount, and Nikon frankly needs a new lens mount, so I'm glad that this is going to be the time. There were a lot of issues with, figuring out, oh, okay, does this lens have autofocus? Does it have auto aperture? So for people who aren't initiated into Nikon's system, like myself, I'm really glad that they're getting a new mount. The thing that I think a lot of people are, also IBIS, the thing that I think a lot of people are ignoring about any efforts that Nikon makes with mirrorless is that, it's easy to say they have to compete with Sony. It's easy to say their value proposition has to be equivalent. What a lot of people don't seem to be realizing is that what Nikon can do very easily is waltz into the market with a camera at 45 megapixels, much like the D850, price it well. They can do the same thing with their 24 megapixel model, price it well, and as long as they have roughly equivalent feature sets to the Sonys, they're going to be totally fine, right? So you don't need to put log profiles in video. You don't need to put, the whole gamut of features in as long as you hit the high points. People will still buy it if you don't dive into every single point of functionality that a Sony offers, because there's brand loyalty to Nikon. What that means realistically, right, is that although you will need 4K Nikon, although Nikon will need 120p and 1080, although there are going to be, frame rate and how fast it clears the buffer specifications that make a really big difference, things like log 2 and 3 aren't going to be necessary. HDR may or may not be something that Nikon feels like they have to do. Additionally, they could say, you know what, we're going to make it only one raw file size. We could make it, they don't have to dive into every little piece and subsidiary component, because they're going to win in a lot of other ways. One of those ways is going to be menus. One of the things that I keep seeing over and over is that Nikon is going to bring a more ergonomic body with a better grip. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense, because ergonomics, there isn't one right way for every human being to hold a camera. You can't say that Canon has better ergonomics than Sony and Nikon is going to make better ergonomics than Sony, because ergonomics are individual to you and to me and to everybody that's deciding to hold a camera. So for me, the ergonomics of my A7 III work better than the ergonomics of my Canon 6D, and they work better than the ergonomics of the 6D Mark II that I tested at the end of last year. So I don't really believe that ergonomics means as much as everybody likes to think that it means, right? If you're going to put a really long lens on it, yes, you will need a different ergonomic setup so that you can hold. You don't want a good old style film body where there's no grip at all. You need some sort of grip. Grips are a great example of this, but button layout, dial layout, there's a lot of ways that Nikon could pare back and still yield a really great result. So do you need, the multifunction dial and a joystick? Could you use that dial for just, aperture or shutter speed? Do you need all of the dials and buttons, right? Do they have to backlight all of the buttons? I think they should do all those things, but those are going to be points at which they can say, you know what, we're going to save a little money here. We're going to increase our profit margin, make this sustainable for the future, and deliver the experience that customers want. So I feel like what everybody's ignoring about Nikon bringing to the mirrorless space, what I feel like everybody is ignoring about Nikon coming into the mirrorless space is that they don't have to compete with Sony directly, right? They don't have to match Apple for Apple to still sell really well. If they say, you know what, we're gonna put in our D850 45 megapixel BSI sensor that's made by Sony, and we're gonna put in IBIS, and we're gonna put in 4K, and we're gonna put in all these great things, they don't also have to put in a 693 autofocus point spread. They don't also, you know what I mean? They have to make it good enough. There's a big difference between enterprise solution and consumer solution. Despite my love of workflow efficiency and, you know, how can I make the process better, I'm still not an enterprise solution client, right? What that means is that my day in, day out job is not delivering photo or video or a digital asset of some kind that has to do with imagery. For people whose day in, day out job it is, those people don't need, you know, the flash and the cool stuff, even the revolutionary technology. They just need it to work. And the amount of effort that goes into just making it work every day is significantly less than developing new technologies, because Nikon has already figured out how to make it work every day. They have the D5, they have the D850, and those are fantastic devices that they can steal a lot of their learnings from, so they can deliver a much better product that doesn't also have to require a huge amount of R&D to hit, you know, a 693 phase stacked autofocus point spread. So I think that's going to make a really big difference, because they already have algorithms. They already know exactly how to make it all line out, and they know the sensors that they can work with. They know the capability. They know how to adjust their color science so that it is Nikon and people will like that. I think that we can see some really great things out of Nikon's mirrorless cameras, but I don't think that it's reasonable to say this needs to be an exact equivalent of or better than an A7R III or an A7 III. I think they're trying to hit different markets, and Nikon can't afford to do that because they don't have the heft in the space that they used to. So in order to get that market share back, they're going to need to cut back on a few points. When Nikon does introduce this new mirrorless mount, I think it makes a ton of sense for them to have 1 or 2 zooms and a couple of primes, right? When we look at the way that Sony introduced the A7, there was the 28-75, there was the 16-35, the 24-70. I don't think they had the 70-200 right away. And then they had the 35-55, and they might have even had the 85, I can't recall. 28 was early on too. So it was a very small batch of lenses, and it worked, and people glommed onto it, because you got to realize that most shooters are not shooting sports at 400 millimeters, right? Most shooters are not shooting extreme wide angle. Most shooters are shooting between 24 and 70. So if you can fit in a couple of lenses that will do really well in that range, you don't even need to, as Nikon, provide a kit lens. You can say we have an f2.8 or we have an f4 with image stabilization, and then put in a few primes, and you're going to be up and running. People will move to that system as Nikon users, and potentially as Sony or Canon users if they've switched or whatever, because of brand loyalty, brand equity, and because it's cool and new. So yeah, I think those are my thoughts on the Nikon mirrorless offerings that will be coming to market very soon. It really should be this year. I think the release date on this has got to be this year. Everything we're seeing is seeming to indicate that it will be sooner rather than later. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.